The Jazz Spotlight, episode number 6. Hello everyone, what is up? And welcome to the 6th episode of the Jazz Spotlight podcast. The first thing I would like to do today is actually thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening to the podcast, for following me on Twitter, for liking the Facebook page. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're listening to the podcast on iTunes or YouTube or SoundCloud, like always, you can find all the links and resources mentioned at thejazzspotlight.com/episode 6. And in case you want to learn more about the podcast and the past episodes of the podcast, you can find them all at thejazzspotlight.com/podcast. And in case you haven't yet, make sure to sign up to the newsletter. Head over to thejazzspotlight.com/toolbox, where you will get a free ebook, a guide that I hope will help you with your online promotion efforts, and you will get weekly tips and resources and special advice that I'm sure will help you out with your business and your career, whether you are a musician or you run a music venue or a festival. All right, let's get started. Today we're gonna talk about what it means to be a musician, and we're gonna do so with a great guest, Brooklyn-based singer Jen Chapin. Jen talks about pretty much everything from how she started out as a musician to the way she promotes her music and the way she finds music venues to perform at, and she plans tours around the US. So plenty of interesting things in this episode, and if you're a professional musician, I'm sure that you can relate to many of the things Jen discusses with me. Whereas if you're thinking about becoming a professional musician, this episode has plenty of inspiration for you and useful tips from Jen. So here is Jen Chapin with what does it mean to be a musician. Enjoy. Alright everyone, welcome to the 6th episode of the Jazz Spotlight podcast. Yanni Lunga here. I'm super excited about today's episode because we're gonna talk about something that many people ask themselves. So the topic of today is gonna be what does it mean to be a musician? And we're gonna have a special behind the scene look with a great musician, a great singer from Brooklyn. It's with great pleasure that I welcome on the show Jen Chapin. Hey Jen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's so nice to be here speaking with you.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here. And I've actually been following Jen for a couple of months now, since I've written the article about the Washington Women in Jazz Festival where she performed at. I became a fan, so I've been really happy to have her here on the show, and I'm glad that she accepted. So Jen, what have you been up to these days?
Well, I recently finished a 3-week tour. Actually, the Women in Jazz Festival that you mentioned in Washington, D.C. was the first date of our tour. And that started in mid-March, went into early April. And we started in D.C., but then we're mostly in the Midwest of the U.S., the sort of iconic cornfield part of the country. Literally, it was very flat, very much about driving through farmland. But it's a place, it's an area that we've returned to again and again, and it's become a big part of my fan base for whatever reason, and I've really come to know and love a lot of people and a lot of cool venues in that area. And we also spent a lot of time in schools with college students, with preschool students, and everything in between. Elementary, middle school, high school kids. And we were doing an artist residency in the Quad Cities area, which even people in the States don't really know about that much necessarily, although it's not too far from Chicago, the famous city of Chicago. But along the northern part of the Mississippi River, they have a program which brings performing artists in and then just basically puts them to an intense schedule of work, doing 3 shows a day, uh, for mostly for kids, but also in libraries and community colleges. And so it was a very satisfying trip because when you're a musician, what you want to do is play, even if in this case we were being well compensated, but in some cases you just want to play, even if you're losing money doing so.
Mm-hmm.
So that I'm just kind of catching up on being back home from that trip and cleaning off my desk, literally, and adding names to my email list of people who signed up on the trip. And now the exciting thing for me is that which often I go long periods of time where I'm just doing the business part of music.
Mm-hmm.
Now the last week or so, I've been really digging into practicing guitar, and even today, just starting a new song. So, always a balance of different activities that are required, but
Does it sometimes get overwhelming?
it almost always gets overwhelming. the
And how do you cope with that?
Well, the ironic part is that, and I think a lot of parents say this, that when I have 2 little boys who are 8.5 and 4.5, and when you talk to other parents of young kids, we all say, what the heck did I do before I had kids? How did I spend my time? Because you learn to get so much more efficient. You learn to make the 20 minutes that you might have really count, really be meaningful work time. And when I used to have the whole day stretched in front of me to write music, to book gigs, to do promotion, then that time just sort of slipped away. But now I write lists. I write a list by the day. I'm really into lists. Everybody has a different way of organizing their time, but for me, I try and structure it to do music first before I open up the laptop and get into all that.
So can we say that lists are your productivity tip or tip for being efficient?
Well, yes, it makes things satisfying because even when you're dealing with this, as you said, overwhelming, varied amount of tasks that you have to complete. And often a task is sending off an email to a venue where you want to play, and the chances of them replying are not always good. the amount the amount of emails I send out or calls I make that aren't returned, that's part of that comes with the territory. And so when you can write on the list, contact this venue, blah, 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 and then you can cross it off the list, at least you did your part. And then sometimes you have to write them again and again to get a response. But so the list for me, it's satisfying because so often you're working, you're making efforts, and you don't know if they actually matter. You're trying to get people to come to your shows, which is always a huge challenge because now they have the full spectrum of entertainment options on their computers and so on. And in some ways and in some areas, the culture of going to hear live music has declined a bit, but you have to try. again and again.
Yeah, that's true. I agree, and I actually think that even though there is YouTube, computers, and what's not, nothing is better than a live gig. At least personally, I still think that live music is.
Well, that's great to hear. Are you a musician? Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't call myself a musician. I play bass guitar, but just for fun. Like I've never really kind of got serious about it, so like studying much or getting to perform in venues. So I play as a hobby, but that's pretty much it.
Well, I would say you should definitely call yourself a musician. Just because you're not a professional musician doesn't. If you love music, you engage with music, you play an instrument, that makes you a musician.
All right. guess I'm a musician then.
Yes, you are. There's a lot of people. I have to say, as a musician, a professional musician, there are times when I'm sure you're practicing your instrument as a hobby more than I'm practicing mine, because I spend a lot of my time just trying to figure out how to get people to my show or get paid. And a lot of times just saying buy my stuff. So in some ways I'm more of a salesperson or a business person than a musician. This is a satisfying time because I've committed to spend more time on the actual music. But sometimes, like in advance of that tour I was mentioning, doing the minimum of practicing just to make sure that I stayed in touch with my instrument, and with my voice. But as far as time spent, I wasn't much of a musician.
We've been up for a couple of minutes only, and you've already talked about so many interesting things: the business side of it, the being efficient side of it, the how to contact venues, touring and performing in kind of a different environment, so being libraries, schools, compared to more traditional music venues. But before we go more into that, I would like to take a step back and ask you about yourself. So how did you get started with music?
Well, I should say first of all that I do play quite a bit of traditional music venues. I do play non-traditional music venues, and I think a lot of musicians do that these days. You kind of you learn how to just make it happen, no matter where. If you can gather ears and people, whether it's in a living room of someone's home or a school or a coffee house, then it's a concert. But I really grew up in surrounded by the possibility of being a musician. Unlike a lot of people, my family, um, my family's full of musicians and artists. And my father was a singer-songwriter who had a number one song on the radio and was pretty successful, if not very well known around the world. He was definitely made his name, and and that said, it was not an automatic path for me. My family was also very interested and engaged with questions of social justice, and particularly hunger and poverty around the world, and in here in the United States. It's a ridiculously big problem that in the richest country in the world, we have 49 million people who are not getting a regular nutritious diet. So I grew up in that environment, both of a father who was playing 200, more than 200 concerts a year, and and was a very involved dad, but was also gone a lot and working a lot. And so that was always very tangible for me. But I was also raised in a house where there was a sense of making your life matter in
Hmm.
terms of engaging with the community and helping out your neighbors, whether that would be as a teacher or as an activist. And so it wasn't automatic for me to pursue music. And I'm the fourth of five children, and I'm the only one who eventually, I was in my early 20s when I wrote my first song. And when I started to commit to that path, and because although I'm not so much as strictly a jazz musician, jazz is my inspiration in a lot of ways. And peer group, the musicians that I connect with, and including the musician I'm married to, Stefan Crump, who's a virtuoso bassist. They're coming more from the jazz world, and as you know, in jazz, it's just an amazing commitment to uh, building up your expression on your instrument, and improvising and practicing and having an expansive knowledge of music theory, which I don't necessarily have, but it's my reference point, I guess you could say. It's what it's what being a musician means to me. Although there's so many ways. There are people who go to school for years to study music. There's people who just open their mouths and start singing, and they're making great music. So it took me a while before I realized that if I were not a musician, whatever else I may be doing, if I were not devoting part of my time to music, at least part of my time, and if I didn't have an outlet for performing, that I would not be happy or even go crazy. So that's what happened. I had gone to university and studied international relations. And then towards the end of my 4 years, I started to have this feeling, this pull of music. Because I'd sung in the rock band in high school and in a funk band in college. And, and I started to realize that I needed to dig in deeper. And luckily, because my family has so many artists and musicians, music is both revered and valued, but also disdained. Most people, if they tell their parents they want to be a musician, their parents say, no, get a real job.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I didn't have that barrier. I had support, if not like, uh, my mother doesn't come to all my concerts by any means. She's full support. Also, it's not a big deal. It's like, okay, whatever, that's your job. But so yes, I went back to school after my getting my bachelor's degree. I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, which is an amazing place, if only a lot of people criticize it, or they even criticize the very idea of going to school for music to just practicing on your own. But it's an amazing place to meet musicians and to become part of a community of musicians. And I met people from all over the world, people who are still my dear friends and inspiration, and people who have developed their own amazing and accomplished careers. So that's kind of fun in itself, just to be like, wow, look at so and so. They just won a Grammy Award or whatever. Or this person's on tour with somebody. People are doing things, and I love musicians. I love being part of that world. But it took a while to really commit.
Mhm. It's a nice story, really really inspirational, and it's just incredible to think that all that you have accomplished so far and what your family has accomplished. And I think it has been just great to hear that you had the opportunity that basically was like, if you would like to become a musician, no one's gonna tell you just go and get a real job, like you said. Now I would like to ask you this: what advice would you have for those people who are playing, kind of by themselves, who perhaps are not in a kind of music school, could be Berkeley, could be some other school, but they would like to kind of get serious or go professional? What advice would you give them?
Well, the main advice I give to people is to be yourself. And in some ways, that's the easiest thing. And in some ways, it's the hardest thing. And it could be a process of you really immersing yourself in studying and absorbing your influences, really thinking, "Oh, I love so and so. Let me figure out what it is about so and so that I love." I should just put an example, Beyonce or somebody, and uh, uh, but then by delving into the music of Beyonce, you might realize, oh, well, Beyonce is a very talented singer, but really it's the whole package. She's above all an entertainer. She's a great beauty. She's a talented dancer. She's got nice wigs. So you start to strip away and you say, well, actually, or is it just this, that she's got this super professional team of songwriters who may know how to turn out hits for her. And so sometimes you have to dig in and ask hard questions, or maybe you want to play guitar just like Pat Metheny. And so you listen to Pat Metheny, you listen to his different albums, you do harmonic analysis of some of his compositions, you learn his best guitar licks, and then from there, you might say, oh, actually, I love that he does this. I love that he does that. But I want to do something a little bit different. What's really me is if I did something like that, but it has a twist to it. So I think some people know right away who they are and what their sound is, and they have an inner voice of music. For me, I feel like I had the almost the advantage that I've never had one of those voices that could sing like Beyonce, for instance. Um, it never felt authentic to me to even try. So what started me as a songwriter was because I love to sing. And I felt for me to be an authentic singer, I needed to um, write my own songs so that when I was opening my mouth to sing, I was making sounds and expressing things that no one had ever done before. And not that they were so revolutionary, what I was doing, but that it was original. And so that was clear to me that I really have the natural ability to imitate various famous singers, which I think a lot of great singers, they can do that style. For instance, they can sound just like what somebody sounds like on the radio, and then that becomes kind of a trap. Um, and the same can go for instrumentalists who have this amazing, they've worked on all their scales, they've worked on all their chords, they can play every song from the Beatles songbook, or they can play just like Chris Bodie on if that's how you say it, on trumpet. But then they lose themselves. So I think you need to spend the time to really find yourself. And
Wow,
then
that's deep.
happens whatever happens, because even when you say I've accomplished so much, and I'm sitting here having this interview, and I, get to go on TV sometimes, and I had lots of great reviews, and I've done maybe 7 albums at this point. So in some ways, I'm very accomplished, but in some ways, I feel like I'm just starting. I feel like I feel like my audience has so much growing to do. I have my income, the money I make is still very hit or miss. Some months I make good money, some months I barely make any. But either way, I feel like I've I've I believe in what I'm doing. I believe songs that I've written. I'm not tired of singing them. I believe in that what I'm doing is me. So that gets me through the tough times. And I think that whatever you're doing, however successful you are, if you believe and if you're true to what you're doing, then that can get you through. Everybody will have tough times. I have quite a few. It was really tough back from this tour, and the tour is great because you're so busy. You have such a plan you have to do. You know that it's Tuesday and I have to drive to this place. I have to play for this group, and you don't have any questions and you're busy. And then it can be hard. You come back from tour and it's like, oh, now what do I do?
And that's exactly the question. What do you do when you're not touring?
What do I do when I'm not touring? Today I woke up. My husband, as I mentioned, is a musician as well. So, and he's on tour with his own group, and that means that all the childcare comes to me. So, I woke up. I woke my kids up. I woke up around 7. Got them dressed and gave them breakfast and packed their lunches. Took them to school and read my little boy a book while in his class. And then I came home and then I had breakfast. Then I went into my studio and started writing down ideas. I sat at the Wurlitzer piano. I sat down there for a while and worked out some chords and some lyrics, and then I wrote some notes for other lyrics, and then now I'm talking to you. So after the talk, I'll work on guitar some more, and then I will spend some time on email, and then I'll pick up my kids. I pick up my kids from school at 2:40. So my work day today is extremely short, but after I put them to bed, then I'll work for a few hours more.
Okay, so sounds like pretty busy, even though you said that it's shorter day. Sounds busy, but I'm sure that you like what you do, both being a musician and most importantly being a mom.
Yes, I do. I do like I think it's you love having more time to do your own thing, and when my husband's home, I'll have some days where I can just work all day on music and cleaning off my desk from all the garbage that's there. But I love the variety, and that's definitely one of the great parts about being a musician is you're not going to sit at the same desk every day, and that can be nice. Part of me would love to have a life that where I know exactly what I'm doing. I when I come home from work, I'm done, and then I just watch TV or whatever. But my life is different every day, and that's fun. But a lot of my time today will be spent with my kids.
Is there anything better than spending time with their own kids? I don't think so.
Great.
Now, let's get into the business side of it. So, usually when people think about artists, they think about, performances, gigs, tours, but they don't often think about the other side of it. So, earlier you mentioned email lists, so checking the new people in the email list, making your own list to be efficient, contacting gigs. So now let's start with this. How do you promote yourself? I know that you have a website, and how do you promote yourself? Let's say during the week. What are the things that you do to promote yourself and your music?
Sure. Well, I have my new album came out last year called Reckoning, just about a year ago. And when I was, as part of that process, I hired a publicist. And so she has been sending out, I call her kind of jokingly my paid best friend, because we're in constant contact and we're always trying. She's great about reaching out to radio and websites and newspapers and magazines about getting my music out there. But she's also really good about coaching me through using social media, Twitter, Facebook. I have a page when I first was figuring out the Facebook thing, which I was very slow to do because I didn't really want to do it. I started a personal page, Jen Chapin, but because I just started it for promotion, I don't really have, say a lot of pictures of my kids and that I really do it just to spread the news about the music. But then eventually I realized, oh yeah, I can start a band page. So I was sort of slow in that, but now I have a page which I always try and point people toward called Jen Chapin Music. And, there people can go and so on. So, and that's a big part. I do a lot of work on Facebook, and I get a lot of messages. And one of the challenging things, it's also very nice, but it's hard because it takes so much time, and some ways you don't know how much it matters, but you know that you have to do it. And then sometimes you think, do I really have to do this? I get a lot of just emails of just people sending me things to listen to, asking questions. A lot of them are from fans of my dad's. So, which is it's a great privilege. My father died in 1981. And it's a beautiful thing when you lose a parent, but yet he's remembered and loved by so many. So it's like he really went away. But it takes a lot of time. I spend a lot of time being responsive to his fans, and the fact that I have a website, jenchapin.com, and Facebook and blah blah blah, and I'm out there, it means that if people have any little question they want to ask about Harry Chapin, they ask me. And so right now in my inbox, my email, I have some multiple things I need to respond to. And it's hard not to have your brain always in transaction mode, but that's the reality, meaning that every time I'm writing an email or something, I'm thinking, I hope this person buys a CD. I hope this person comes to the show. Or sometimes I'm writing, please buy my CD. Please come to my concert. And it's a little bit hard as far as maintaining the purity of relationships, I think, in that you're always looking to sort of get something out of it, but at the same time as you're fighting against that and trying to just be a human. And that's the challenge. It's great to be an independent musician and have your own control and not be dependent on what your record label or your manager tells you to do and so on. But it also means that nobody is going to sell you as hard as you're going to sell yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. That's very true. Is
and
the beauty?
You're always selling.
I'm sorry?
So that means you're always selling.
Yeah, definitely. But like, I agree with you about the, beauty of being independent. So to have some kind of freedom, but at the same time to have extra pressure when it comes to promotion, to marketing. And actually talking about promotion and marketing for musicians, you mentioned your website, you mentioned Facebook, social media. On the second episode of the Jazz Spotlight podcast with Bob Yosinski, we talked about online promotion for artists. You should definitely check it out. Not only you, Jen, but also all the people who are listening to these episodes, because Bobby gave out great tips and he shared the do's and don'ts of online promotion. So he really talked about the biggest mistakes he sees artists, music venues, festivals, and people in the music industry doing on Facebook, on Twitter, on their websites. So it's definitely worth checking. You can find it at the jazzspotlight.com/episode 2, and you will find also all the resources and links that we mentioned. You will find them there. So it's definitely worth checking.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Now, my next question to you, you talked about your email list. I would like to quickly talk about it. My question to you is, it's a bit tricky, but why did you start an email list?
Oh, well, I actually think that's not tricky at all. You do it because you have to. And I was just reading yesterday something that was talking about saying that it's the most important thing that you do as an independent musician is to build up your email list. I actually started my email list, I think it was in 1996 or 97, really quite a long time ago. And at that time, I would do a concert and then I would pass a notebook around in the audience and everybody would sign up because it was so exciting. Everybody thought, oh, wow, email. I just got an email address. And now you have to work much harder because everybody's so inundated. They're just drowning in email and spam. So nobody wants to sign up. But it's the way that you can get the word out about your music. I try and make my email communications interesting, and that they're often, I spend some time on the writing and making it something that goes a little bit beyond just a list of shows, but sometimes there's some political commentary and opinions about things going on in the news. I try and be very restrained with that. I don't want to do that too much, but it does feel like I believe that music and all art is a very important part of our democracy and the ongoing dialogue that we need to have about what is important to all of us as a species. And I've gotten some complaints. Sometimes people say, and I don't want to hear about it. I care about your music. I don't care about your opinions. And I really feel like it's there. They can't be detached as long as I have certain guidelines. As far as I don't want to be, it's not like a political opinion, like, vote for Obama or don't vote for Obama. I try to have it be something that's takes a step back and asks as many questions as it answers, and allows people to be engaged in a way of thinking and of discussing rather than just reacting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also think that, it can happen. I also have signed up to different email services, and it can happen that, let's say if it's a weekly email, that there is that week where the email you get, it's perhaps, not what you expect, or it's bit to some extent disappointing, if you see what I mean. Like in your case, maybe someone is waiting to get news about your music and get some kind of commentary, so one feels a bit disappointed. But on the other hand, I think that it's important to know that on the other side of the email there is a person. So in this case there is you, and I think it's great what you are doing, that the emails you send out, of course they focus on specific things, but they're also heterogeneous, always diversified, and it's not always like, okay, these are my upcoming gigs, see you there. Okay, these are my upcoming gigs, see you there. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, you talked about your website and about Facebook, how you got started with Facebook, how about having people constantly writing to you about your dad, about your music and your email list. How about music venues and festivals? How do you personally look for venues to perform at and festivals to perform at? How do you do that?
Well, I think that's gotten a lot easier. That's one thing. Some things have gotten harder in the digital age. And I started doing music when as I mentioned, when email was still kind of new. Not everybody had a website, and I used to pay to order this book that had a list of all venues across the country, and I would look through the book and look at phone numbers. Sometimes there'd be emails or websites, but a lot of times I would just call, and I would depend on things being listed in that book. Now I'll do a Google search for a acoustic music in St. Louis, Missouri, and something will come up, and I'll look at websites and I'll try and get an idea of what kind of venue it is, if it's just a loud rock sports bar or if it's a place where people are really listening, because that's a big priority. I'd rather have fewer people and make less money than be in a big loud thing where I'm just struggling to get heard. I just don't enjoy that. I really like to have silence to sculpt, and to have you want to have some people there, that's for sure. That's the best part, is when you really have the people create a kind of magical sense of anticipation in the air that you can mold. But I don't like to compete with, a baseball game on TV, as too many venues do have that. But now it's all online, and I just write emails, and a lot of venues, they'll even have a page of information for artists. This is what we need. This is what we're looking for. This is how you contact us. And so a lot of things have made it easier. It's harder in that there's so many people trying. It almost feels like there's more musicians trying to book gigs than there are people who want to come to gigs.
And when you send an email to a music venue, what is the standard content of your email? So, for example, what copy do you have? What text do you have? You will have a link to your website. Do you perhaps have reviews or or pictures, some kind of press release? What is it that you usually have in the email you send to music venues?
Well, every email we've corresponded by email. Every email I send has my signature, and even sometimes I try, and my default is every time I send an email, it has all these links to YouTube, to my website, to Facebook. It has some quotations from reviews. It has a little bio. It's a huge bit of information. So basically, just by scanning down my email, you can get a full sense, and clicking on, you can get a full sense of what my music is about. I don't know if this is the exact model of how to do things. I think it probably is good. And so generally in the email itself, I'm pretty straight ahead. I say I would love to be considered for this date. And I don't even try and do a big sales pitch in the things that I write, because it's already in there. Either you like the music and think it's going to make sense, or you don't. What I've found is that, especially at this point, my name has been out there. I can get attention quickly enough, but getting people to actually come to the show is a lot harder than booking the concert. A lot of people they'll have me play, but whether or not that will really sell tickets is another question.
Do you have any advice for music venues or even festivals, how to attract people so that, places are full with jazz enthusiasts and not like, the guys that are at the bar because they want to watch the baseball game on the TV, like you said, and the performance, it's like kind of background music. So what would you say to music venue directors and festival organizers?
Well, I think whatever kind of venue it is, I have found that having doing a feature on the radio, being on the front page of the newspaper, that does not mean as much as somebody just talking to their friends. So the best concerts I have done, some of them have been in small towns, but they are presented by people who are in touch with other people, and they're just in their regular, casual, day-to-day conversations. They just say, are you coming to the show on Tuesday, May 20th at the Rockwood Music Hall, Stage 2? Jen Chapin's playing with her full band. That is what matters. People want to know that their friends are going. People want to know that there's that it's kind of a thing that's happening. Reading about it is not enough. So that's the most important part, is just what they call the word of mouth.
Yeah, the good old and powerful word of mouth. Of course, it still matters despite Facebook and all these things. But I actually think that on episode 2, Bobby talked about music festivals sharing pictures of happy crowd. I think it's really important, because if, let's say, a jazz club manages to give a good vibe already from its webpage, it can do a lot. If you see, or even if they have videos. For example, there are some jazz clubs that they have perhaps a YouTube channel, so that people can kind of leave the atmosphere of the club even before going there. And I think that really has an influence. At least that's even what I do before going to a festival or a venue. I always check some live performances to see what kind of atmosphere there is, but also what kind of perhaps acoustics or the settings and all these kind of things. So I think that word of mouth, like you said, it's really like it's still really relevant, but also on the kind of organizing point of view, to sell the venue or the festival like in a welcoming way, so that people are kind of, wow, I have to go and check this place out. And oh, and guess what, next week Jen Chapin is performing there. You know what, next week I'm going there. I think it's really important. But now, about, like, we've talked about music venues, and we mentioned a bit festivals, and you said that, yeah, you sit on your computer, you start to make some searches to see what kind of place it is, and then you contact the place. And what about the bigger picture? So tours, how do you organize a tour? How do you plan a tour? You say, okay, am I gonna tour the East Coast or the whole country? How do you do that?
Generally, I start with what we call an anchor date, where usually it's something that comes. It's the possibilities are kind of endless and in some ways scary. And like I said, I I usually at this point could write to a pretty good venue and say, can I play? And a lot of times they'll say yes, not always, but a lot of times they will. But that is not enough. I at this point I'm kind of past the point where I want to go out and know that I'm going to lose a lot of money. I very much I'm not in a band where it's like, okay, guys, we're all just going to pile up in the van together. We're going to sleep on the floor of some fan, and if we make some money, we'll split it down the way. From the beginning, I have paid people I work with, and I don't perform solo except for, short little things like 20 minutes here and there. But if I'm doing a full concert, it's with one or two or three or four or five other musicians who need to get paid. So at this point, I need that one thing. And usually it's something that comes to me, not as much as I would like, but something that comes to me that is that has a set amount of money attached, where I know it's enough to get us started, and then I'll start filling things in around from there. And there could be a big variety in what the revenue is from the concerts I do on a tour. People ask, well, what's your fee? And I say everything from $5,000 to negative $500. Sometimes I'll do a benefit, I'll donate us because I know that the next night I'm getting paid enough to cover my expenses and hotel rooms and so on. So it really depends. But pretty much if I do a tour, it is something that has some kind of significant show. I mean, that some kind of anchor date.
Yeah, I see. Now my next question to you is about musical collaboration. You said that you usually tour with other musicians, and on the episode 5 of the podcast we had my colleague of the Grammy Award winning band Snarky Puppy, who talked about musical collaborations and tours. So I would like to ask you this: how do you find musicians for collaborations? Can be touring, can be performing together somewhere, can be recording together. How do you find guests? Let's call them guests.
I'm not a huge collaborator. I think I should be more as far as really reaching out. But a lot of times people find me. They ask me what's if they could do an opening set, or the venue asks me is it okay if this person plays as part of the bill. But it really depends. At this point, I feel like I know so many great musicians here in New York City. I think it's the best music city in the world. And so it's it the more musicians you know, the more you meet.
Okay, let's wrap up this episode with a final tip from you or advice. What would you tell to people who, are musicians and are somehow having a crisis or are struggling and are thinking about maybe I should just quit? What would you tell them?
Well, that's me. I can say the conversations I've had with myself. It goes in cycles. So some people, if it's not making you happy, if it's not making you happy for its own sake, regardless of the money and the adulation that you might receive, then, and if you're not feeling like you're contributing something of value to the world, then maybe you should find another passion. It's about doing what you love. And I have a song. It's called "Let It Show," which it's in some ways my most popular song. And it's the video for it is going to be debuted on American Songwriter Magazine online May 6th. Anyway, the basic refrain of the song is "Find your joy and let it show." So if you love it, if you just can't imagine your life without it, if regardless of whether you're the best musician ever, if you love it, then you'll make it happen. If and some people, some great musicians I know are actually doctors on the side, or they're visual artists on the side. There's all kinds of other things that you can do while you're doing music, and some of those people end up, even if it's not their regular day job, they end up playing just as many concerts and having just as much of a satisfying expression, even if they're not trying to make all their money. And that can be great. Part of me is envious of people who have another career and they're not having to make all their money from music. So that could be something to think about. But is finding another thing. If you really love music, if you really love doing it, but it's too hard, then you can love it even more if you're not depending on it for your livelihood. And it can be kind of a pure, beautiful thing to just play. But get back down to that essence. I mean, what happened to me recently is I was thinking, well, I don't know what happens next. I just came back from this tour. I'm depressed. And I thought maybe I should quit. Maybe I should do something else. And then it comes back to, again, well, even though I have other skills and I have other things I'm interested in, this is the life that lets me spend time with my kids, that lets me work with my husband. I don't want any other life. And actually I've kind of worked it out so that this life is kind of working. And so then I come back around and then I think, oh, what do I need to do? I need to write, instead of just selling stuff I already did, sell, which is only so much fun. I need to write new songs, write new music, and actually make music. Because that's the thing. You can be spending all your time, as I said, theoretically being a musician, but really you're just a salesperson.
That's really nice advice that you gave, and I actually agree. No matter what one does, people should do what makes them happy, be it playing music for fun or professionally, or being a doctor and a guitar player or whatever. I really like it. Honest, straight to the point, and simple. What is the best way to find you online, Jen, if people would like to learn more about your work and they found you?
Well, JenChapin.com, and there's a store on there as well. All my songs, my recorded music is streaming there. so you can listen. I have my new album, Reckoning, is my favorite, and I think it's my best. And you can listen to it. You can read the lyrics. You can download it. It's on iTunes as well. But you can get it in FLAC, a high quality file, or MP3, or CD, or MP, or LP. I printed on vinyl as well. And then my past albums are up there. If you search Jen Chapin on YouTube, you'll find both live performance video and some music videos that I've done for the new songs. Some are animated, some are narrative stories. And Jen Chapin, Facebook.com/Jen Chapin Music. I'm updating that all the time with news, and in some ways it's more current than my website as far as having, the latest of the day. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay, that's great. And I will put all the links you mentioned in the show notes so that people, if you go at thejazzspotlight.com/episode 6, you will find there all the resources Jen just mentioned. Jen, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your story and for giving out practical tips to all the people listening.
I hope it was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was Jen Chapin. Jen, if you're listening, thank you once again for sharing your story with us. Before wrapping up this episode, I would like to quickly talk about newsletters, because newsletter, it's a topic that is popping up really often during the podcast. We have talked about it with Bobby Onzinski on episode 2, with Amy Bormet in episode 3, Buddy Vogt on episode 4, and now with Jen. So I think that having a newsletter, it's really important because it gives you direct access to your followers and to people who are really interested in what you're doing. I have a newsletter and I welcome you to sign up for it. Just head over to thejazzspotlight.com/toolbox where you can sign up completely for free. You will get a free guide that talks about online promotion for musicians, and every week you will get useful tips, tools, and strategies that I hope will help you with your business and your career. If you don't have a newsletter yet and you're thinking about building your own, there are plenty of tools out there, but the one I strongly recommend to you is Aweber. It's the same one I use. If you would like to try it, you can sign up for just as little as $1 if you head over to thejazzspotlight.com/get Aweber, and Aweber is spelled Aweber, Aweber. You can try it and see if it works well for you. I haven't had any problem with it yet. I think it's great because you can build an email list in just a couple of seconds, and trust me, you want to have a newsletter because newsletter, it's a very, very powerful and useful tool. And once again, I would like to remind you that all the things we've talked about with Jen, you can find them in the show notes at thejazzspotlight.com/episode 6. I'm Yanni Lunga, and this is the Jazz Spotlight Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you a great day.